This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in places that could expose you to identity theft. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points every second. If your identity is stolen, their US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This is what you do when you've just found that statement handbag on eBay and you want to build an entire wardrobe around it. You start selling to keep buying. Yep, on eBay. Over that all-black everything phase? List it and buy all the color. Feeling more vintage than ever? It's out with the new and in with the pre-loved. Next thing you know, you've refreshed your wardrobe basically without spending a dime. Yeah, eBay, the place to buy and sell new, pre-loved, vintage, and rare fashion.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to A Catholic's Perspective, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Today is take two, Steve, isn't it?
Take two, that's right.
We originally had this podcast a week ago, and my microphone decided to die on me, hence why I now have the SM7, because I needed to invest in a forever microphone. And this is my forever microphone now, and hopefully it won't die on me like my Yeti did.
I had a snowball. I have a snowball. That's in my upstairs area where I do my sketch recording, and the tripod on it broke, and so now I have to hold it when I'm doing it, and it's less reliable, but it still works as a microphone. So.
If it still works, it's fine.
It was only $20, but it does actually have really good audio quality. So,
Steve, we were texting earlier today, and what you sent me is what I wanted, like this whole like podcast to be called, and I don't know if I can find it again, but it was really funny. Oh yeah, you said I think we should talk about all of question 168, not just eutrophilia, but modesty, humor, joy, hope, and fighting scrupulosity about it all.
Yeah, I like so I mean today, the day of recording, I'm causing problems online right now by being honest about men's dating advice culture. And that's probably a mistake. And so this is obviously a pre-recorded broadcast, so we're not live. So, but if somebody were to go back to the Catholic_comedy on the Twitters, you might see the fallout or the eventual fallout. I don't know how it's going to go after the next couple of hours, but question 168 relates to a lot of this. Okay. So let's start with what is question 168 of the Summa Theologica. So St. Thomas Aquinas, obviously, in his Summa Theologica, talks about like literally everything, right? And you hear a lot about some of the other stuff in the questions and a lot of the other things, like when it pertains to like some Protestant ideology, or it pertains to like, is there some virtues or like manliness and stuff, like people will talk about this a lot, but what you don't hear a lot about, and I looked into it, and I have my little AI tool, and now it's not perfect, but I did ask it. I trained my AI to know 168 forwards and backwards, and I asked it, has anyone written any books about question 168? And the answer is no. And people write books about all sorts of things. People write books about like a single verse in the Bible, and they write a whole book about what it means. This is probably one of the most important questions that St. Thomas Aquinas answers for our society today. And we don't talk about it, and we haven't delved deep into it. And I don't know theologians that talk about it at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of any.
But they talk about some of the stuff it does talk about, but they don't talk about the entirety of it. I don't think there's 10 seconds of silence in my whole household. So question 168, a lot of people want to talk about stuff that's mentioned in it without talking about the actual fullness of it. So we're talking about question 168, and what is it about? I said the word 168 a lot, but the entirety of it is about modesty. And so it takes this idea of modesty and it breaks it into 4 parts. One is like, what is modesty? One is talks about playing games. One, or it talks about eutrapelia, like good humor, and then it talks about buffoonery. Okay, so last time we were talking about eutrapelia, and that's question 168, section 3. So
Okay.
section 1 and 1 is modesty. Section 2 is games. Section 3 eutrapelia. Section 4 is buffoonery. And so you start with modesty, and St. Thomas Aquinas goes into someone saying that like actions don't portray modesty. Modesty is, you don't have to worry about modesty in action; it's in dress, right? It's the look, right? But he contends in his object, and like he answers the objections, and what he's saying is that modesty isn't just what you see; it's how you act, right? And if you acting immodestly is not about whether or not you're acting in some sort of sexually charged manner, which is what we've all taken it to mean today, right? If you
Yeah.
say someone is immodest, what you're saying is that they are being sexually charged. But modesty is about fitting your actions and appearance towards the situation that you're in currently, right? So you wouldn't wear a ball gown to mass. That would make you immodest, even if the gown covered everything, because that's not the appropriate attire to mass, right?
Right.
In some respects, things that we consider to be proper attire for mass, right, that a lot of people would say is proper attire for mass, may not be proper attire for all masses that you go to, depending upon the situation. We won't go into the details there, but like the idea here is there are societal expectations for how someone should look and dress given who they are, where they are, and the situation that they are in, right?
Mm.
And last time we were talking about like making jokes at a funeral, right?
Yeah.
That's not appropriate unless it is appropriate. And that depends entirely on the person who is making the joke, the person who is being buried, and the people who they are mourning with. And so sometimes that is appropriate and sometimes it's not. So you take like, this is when I was talking to my wife about it last night, right? You take gym attire, right? In a gym is completely modest because that's appropriate for the situation that you are in,
Right.
right? If you're in a gym and you're wearing tight fitting clothes, it's because that is what you is necessary to wear in that situation. You could say that, like, then people will argue like, oh, men and women shouldn't be in the same gym. Like, you can make that argument, and that's a separate argument entirely. But when you're talking about modesty, um, when you're at a gym, you should be wearing the clothes that are appropriate to be at a gym,
Right.
right? But those same clothes would not be appropriate to be at mass, and those same clothes would not be appropriate to be at a wedding and things like that. So, but it goes beyond clothing to actions. Actions can show virtue and they can show vice. So when you're talking about like virtuous behavior and unvirtuous behavior, those are ways of showing modesty and immodesty. And this is where we kind of get lost when we're talking about modesty, because we focus on modesty specifically being what women wear to different situations, right? So what a woman wears to a beach, is it modest or not modest? Like, but what we're really saying is it appropriate for the situation given societal expectations, right?
Right.
Like the ancient Greeks, the men would go to the gym and they would be naked at the gym, and that would just be what they would do.
I don't
But
find
that,
that to be very comfortable,
well,
though.
no, I mean but I'm saying like that was if you went to a gym, if you went to an ancient Greek gym and you were fully clothed, it would be weird and immodest for those people at
Mm.
that time. So, I mean, so there's a lot of discussions that can be had about it, but the idea is it's not just clothing, but it is also action. That's the part I'm trying to get to. Okay, so it is action, right? So if your actions are not portraying virtue in the proper situation, you are being immodest.
Hmm. This is a whole different take on like the modesty discourse. I love it.
Yeah, it's well this is Thomas Aquinas's take on the modesty discourse. And this is the part that we lose because we have redefined what modesty means. Kind of like the word accident. Like when Thomas Aquinas talks about accident, he means something completely different than what we say when we're talking about accident.
Hmm.
Because there's a completely like something's accident is like something what is I'm not fully in on all the things, but like there are words that he uses that in the context of like that were one of the meanings of that word is what we've just decided all of the meaning is instead of
Mm.
taking it piece by piece, right? And
I
instead of
see.
understanding the differences.
Right.
So when he talks about modesty, when he talks about sins against modesty, it is your outward appearance and your outward appearance is part of your actions that showcase your internal like a situation. So if you are, here's the part that's going to get me in trouble. If
Oh boy.
if you are attacking someone because you feel like in a public setting because you feel like they are being immodest in dress, you yourself are being immodest in action.
This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop up to 45% off select styles, plus a free professional measure during the Blinds.com year-end blowout. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Because but this is Aquinas, because what you are doing is publicly admonishing someone, and you are committing several sins in that moment against charity, against justice, right? You're not giving that person an opportunity to do the right thing. You are instead immediately admonishing them. And if you were to say you found someone who had a picture that you felt was immodest, and you broadcast that to everyone who follows you, say on Twitter, you are also committing scandal in a variety of ways. One, if you're right about them being immodest, you're taking something that is immodest and you're broadcasting it out to people who would not have seen it, therein causing scandal for them, potentially for them to fall because they saw something that could tempt them into lust. But if you're wrong, you are causing scandal because you are taking something that is fine, saying it is not fine, and then telling your people it's not fine, and so they in turn will judge others as you have judged them. Right.
That's a slippery slope.
It is, and this is where we have to be super careful. Anyone who has a following, and everyone has some level of following, even if you like 100 people follow you, you have some level of following, right? And I don't have a huge following. I got like 6,000, something like that. You crush me. You're like at 45.
Hey man, 46, but who's counting? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But I have to be careful because, and like we have to be careful with you have to be careful as like who you dunk on, right? Like, let's say Taylor Marshall has like 100,000, 200,000 followers, maybe more. I don't know.
I don't remember.
It's a lot. He's got a lot of followers, right? He takes someone who is unknown and he admonishes them publicly. right? He is now if they've done something wrong, if they've done something moral, if they've done something lustful or whatever, he has taken his 100,000 or whatever followers and directed them to this immoral content.
Right.
And so that is a sin against modesty itself. And it's all these different sins compounded together because because you're not following the proper filial correction process. And when you don't follow the proper filial correction process, you are inviting scandal, you're inviting wrath, and you're inviting sins against charity. And there's just a whole lot of terrible stuff that can happen, right? And like, we're not even into the eutrapelia and like the other sins that this is just on the modesty aspect, right? I took these a bunch of scenarios, and I told an AI program, and not everyone likes AI, but I told an AI program, be Aquinas and judge the people in this situation based upon what is in the Summa, specifically in regards to question 168. And so I did scenarios where it was a woman, a man, and then another man. Right. So there's an initial woman who does something, a man who reacts to it, and another man who reacts to the man's reaction.
Okay.
Okay. So it started out innocent, like an innocent type of thing. There is a woman who has a moderate following, and she posts a picture of herself in at the beach in shorts and a t-shirt.
This sounds familiar, Steve.
And
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, so I put it in there, and then there's a man who has a decent following, slightly more than the female's following. I've done more, I did less, whatever. But for the first one, like more than the female's following. And he rebukes the female for the thing that she posted because he felt it was immodest. And then the second male comes in and tells the first male to relax, cool down, not to make a big deal out of it. Okay. And I ratcheted things up all along the ways where the woman was posting, or like, this is all text-based, it wasn't pictures or anything, but I was like in there just saying the scenario where the woman is posting things that are more and more potentially scandalous, and her varying follower count from, like, she's a nobody to she's a superstar to whatever, right? Whatever, right? And then things like she didn't release the photos, but somebody else released the photos of her, and like all these different scenarios. Okay. And in all but one scenario, the man was in the wrong. The podcaster who does the initial correction has sinned in some way, shape, or form against modesty, charity, justice. He impugns the woman's the woman's honor. All these different things, right? He accuses her, he impugns her, he scandalizes his followers, both in sharing the content that could be scandalous and in scandalizing them to wrath, because scandal is not just about sexual sin. Scandal is about any kind of sin, scandalizing towards wrath, or to think that they should be judging women in the same way that he has done. The only situation where it was appropriate was if the woman has a sizable following and had a podcast that promoted virtues and chastity, and she was then openly and flagrantly doing something pornographic for the purposes of increasing her following, and refused to stop doing her podcast about virtue and chastity. In that instance, the man is permitted to publicly name her, the woman, warn his followers, and without discussing specifics, talk about the issue, the issues that is raised. If he talks about the specific, then he's causing scandal. Can't talk about specifics. And then the second guy always rebukes the first guy, and the second guy rebukes the first guy. In that instance, the second guy would have rebuked the first guy for not going far enough and not not disparaging her enough, and he's in the wrong.
Mm.
But the only time that the initial person who is attacking the woman for what she's doing is right is when he is correcting her, and there is no way he could have done so privately.
Right. And I think that also brings us back to the Bible in a way where the Bible says, I don't remember the exact passage, but if there's an issue with somebody, you speak to them directly. If they still don't
Right.
change, then you you kind of until you work your way up to the top. But you always start with trying to talk to that person one on one.
Right.
And in my experience, most of the people who do these types of things are looking for clicks and clout and extra money because we kind of talked about this in our last podcast, but in the similar way how sex sells, negativity or scandal sells. So it totally
Yes.
makes sense.
And because of your outward actions being a part of modesty, right? That when you are using fear to sell things, you are being immodest
Mm-hmm.
because modesty. The main part of modesty is moderation, right? It is when you are being modest, you are doing the appropriate thing at the appropriate time for for your station and your level of clout, right?
Right.
So the instances where I went through, there were definitely points that Aquinas would have, if he was talking to the woman, would have said, "Hey, you shouldn't do these types of things," right?
Right.
And then we're talking to the one who's rebuking the man, right? He's saying, like, a lot of the time, the one that says "cool it," like most of those times, he's completely right, and there's nothing sinful there, unless he's doing so out of anger or revenge or something like that. But that was the crazy thing. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna dial this up a notch. I'm like, the woman is like doing something pornographic, and he's pointing it out that she's doing that, and it's like, no, he shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have pointed it out unless she specifically is has like her clout is associated with morality.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to call her out in a direct way because nothing that she is doing would, or like if she's doing all those things are personal sins at that point. Even if they are available publicly, they don't interact with her public persona. And if they're not, if they don't, if her public persona isn't purporting to be like someone doing something evil, right? People do evil, sinful things all the time. And you don't need to bring it to light unless that thing also is causes hypocrisy.
Mm. Yeah.
So, and it's kind of this it's kind of crazy to think about because you would think, right? So like you would think that if you found out that one of your followers, right, that says that they're a Catholic, does pornography, that you should call it out, right? But you shouldn't, unless they have some sort of public persona where they are trying to showcase that, and then they are also publicly announcing their sin.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for you to call it out.
And
Now
I feel
there's
like if you did genuinely have a concern for them, to reach out to them
Mhm.
personally. And if you can't reach out to them personally, leave it alone.
If you can't reach out to them personally, there are different ways that you can do it, right? The thing is, the public reaction has to be the last reaction,
Right.
right? So the first, and then we're talking about filial correction. The first thing you do is you go to the person personally, and if you cannot, you go to their priest,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if you cannot, you go to their bishop, and if you cannot, you try to find someone else who can go to them, or go to their priest, or go to their bishop. But the last thing you should do is go directly to the public, especially if they don't have as much clout as you do, right? Because what you're doing is you're calling attention to someone who otherwise would not have had that attention drawn to them. And you
Right.
could be scandalizing others, not just by showcasing that person and showcasing the content that they're talking about, but if you're wrong, then you are giving license to people who think that you are a good and virtuous person to do the same thing to others,
Right.
which is another one of the big problems that we have with this debate, because what you have is someone saying this is not appropriate, right? And then someone else saying, ah, well, so and so podcaster just did a whole show about how this is not appropriate and sinful, and you are doing this, therefore you are sinful, and I get to, showcase my piousness and my pride against you,
Right.
right? Like I get to bring you down, and and that's not cool.
Yeah.
As Aquinas would put it, not cool. Not cool, bro.
Not cool, bro. And I think we even talked about the fact that on social media, people just love being scandalized in
They do.
general. They
They
love
do.
to blow things out of proportion, take things that weren't really that big of a deal and just run with it. I mean, we talked about it where like a priest or something in another church that was an isolated incident
Right.
taught something heretical, and Twitter found it and just blew it way out of proportion. So something that could have been an isolated incident with a nobody priest in a nobody town, nobody church, is now all of a sudden broadcast across the entire world basically,
Right.
and how this entire scandal's out there for everybody to take an opinion on, when in reality the problem was probably fixed when somebody wrote his bishop.
Right. Or could have been fixed. And what happens is, and this is where like the psychology comes into it. I took some courses in college. And I don't have a degree, but I took some courses.
Same, it's fine.
And in one of the courses I took was about conflict and how conflict works. And so and understanding why God wants us to do something, and then understanding psychology allows you to understand why God wants you to do something, right? So if I came to you and I immediately said, I don't like your hair, right? If I said that, if I just came to you and said, I don't like your hairstyle, right? The first thing you would do, because I have come out and openly attacked you, is you would defend yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? You would defend, even if you didn't like your hairstyle at that moment, you would then turn on the defensive because I'm attacking you. And we have what's called like positive and negative face. Positive face is wanting to be accepted. Negative face is wanting to be alone. So I've created an affront to your negative face because I have attacked you on the base on something that you, even if you didn't like it, you wanted to be left alone about it, right?
Right.
You didn't want the attention. You didn't want people to talk about your hair, but I have now talked about your hair, and now you're going to defend yourself against that attack,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so when we attack somebody publicly, what we are doing is if they didn't want to be attacked, if they didn't want that thing to be brought up, they're going to start defending it. They're going to trench themselves in because now it's something that they're fighting about. And it doesn't even matter if they actually liked it before, they're going to fight it now. If I came to you personally, right? Like if I posted on Twitter that I hate your hair, which I don't, it's fine. But if I came to you personally and I was like, hey, I'm not sure if that hairstyle fits you, right? And I did it with kindness or something like that, you would be more open to listen
Yeah, I'd
to
be like, oh
something.
my gosh, thank goodness you noticed, because I got the worst haircut ever of my life and it's been bothering me.
Right. And so like that's something that you could work with. Now, that personal interaction, the one-on-one interaction. Now, if you were obstinate about it, it's just hair and I drop it. But if it was something sinful, I can't just drop it. I'd have to be like, hey, what you're doing is sinful.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I need you to know that. I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just saying what you were doing is sinful and it puts you in danger of hell. And I don't want that to happen to you. So I wanted to let you know in case you didn't know. Right.
Right.
And then if you're obstinate about that, that's when you would have to bring somebody else and be like, hey, look, I know that you don't think this is a bad thing. Let's go talk to your priest. And then if we go talk to your priest, and if your priest says it's fine, then he has the authority, and I'll leave that as it is. We go talk to your priest, right? And then you and I can go talk to your priest. And your priest could say either yes, it's sinful, or no, it's not. And if he says yes, it's sinful, and you're like, well, I'm still going to do it, then I would be like, okay. I talk to your priest, like, hey, we got to go talk to the bishop because she's, and like that authority coming in, being like, yeah, definitely, this is a sinful thing, and you need to stop. And theoretically, you would then go to the Pope afterwards, and get like official
Let's go
ruling.
to Rome, yeah.
but that's the steps that you need to take. But if I immediately come out publicly and attack you for whatever thing, you're going to bunker down, and you're that first conversation where you'd be like, you could have been like, I didn't know that was sinful. thank you for pointing it out.
Right.
But if I come and immediately attack you, not only publicly do you start to defend yourself, but then a legion of people will come in to defend you as well, and to take your sinful nature and to solidify it and to say, no, it's not sinful.
Right.
And like, that's where we're in now. People do want to be scandalized, and the people in the Bible that wanted to be scandalized the most were the Pharisees. So there was, I mentioned this when we talked before, but I'm going to mention it again because nobody else heard it. My priest gave a homily on it, and it changed the way I looked at conversations that we have online. He talked about how there are two types of scandal. Okay. There's scandal of the innocent, which is, I didn't know, right? I didn't know any better, and I was scandalized by something that happened, right? To be scandalized, there's two types of scandalizing that you can be, right? Scandal, the scandalization means to trip up in your faith. Seeing something that is sinful doesn't scandalize you. Believing something that is sinful is not sinful does, right? Or something that causes you to sin would, but like seeing and knowing something that's sinful is not as. But somebody who is innocent, say, that didn't know premarital cohabitation is forbidden, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't know that because society says it's fine, and they weren't aware. And then you tell them, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know. I was scandalized by society." That's scandalization of the innocent, right? Then there's pharisaical scandal. Now, the Pharisees went to Jesus, and he was healing people on the Sabbath, right? On a Saturday, the Sabbath. So he's healing people on the Sabbath, and so the Pharisees come to him and say, "Hey, are you supposed to be healing people on a Saturday?" And they're looking for him to say something heretical. They're trying to push him. They're looking for an excuse to tear their clothes, to say that they have been scandalized, so that they could then persecute him. And that's pharisaical scandal, which means that you look for something that's not scandalous, or that may not be scandalous. Maybe it's scandalous, maybe it's not. But you are looking, like, along your path to Christ, along your path to heaven, you are looking for roots along the way to stick your foot in so you could trip. So that you can trip and then blame the roots for it. But you're looking for it. And that's our problem. When you say that people want to be scandalized, that's what they're looking for, right? That's when they are looking through every papal encyclical that comes out, and they're checking word by word to find something, right? Whether it's because they're trying to make money off of the scandal, or if it's because they are being so scrupulous that they're self-scandalizing in that respect, they're looking for a reason to trip.
Says a lot about kind of where we are as I don't want to say as a church, but where we are as a society, where it's like we can't even, like, we I don't know how to explain it, but it's kind of like with pornography, where you get hooked on it and then you need more and then more, and then it progressively gets more violent or worse. Kind of how this is too. It's like people get latched on to the doom scrolling, and then it just gets worse and worse, and then they become the one who starts spreading this propaganda or propaganda.
It's conspiracy theories, and they're addictive because it allows you to not have to do anything but feel like you are doing something.
Right.
So like if you think that the government is doing something evil and there's nothing you can do to stop it, you can talk about it endlessly and obsess about it, and it makes you feel a little bit better because you know and you understand. If you feel like the Pope is evil and he's trying to do evil things, you can't stop him. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop him. That's, God's the only one that can stop the Pope from doing something, or, someone who is close enough to him. Like, you're a girl sitting in an apartment in Chicago, I think, right?
Yep.
The Pope's not going to call you up and say, "Hey, should I release this encyclical?" Like, that's not going to happen. There's nothing you can do, but you feel like you can do something by talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, and this is where I'm going to bring it. I'm going to bring it into. We're gonna move into talking about a little bit about eutrapelia and stuff like that. Half circle. bring it back to question 168, is that the well the well-humored man cannot be scandalized. Someone with a good sense of humor cannot be scandalized because humor,
Oh.
okay, is the understanding of what is and isn't serious.
That's
So
fair.
Fulton has a great thing about the divine humor. It's a 30-minute video. You should watch it. And I don't know, link it somewhere if you find it. But it talks about divine humor, and like the Pharisees tried to scandalize Christ, but they couldn't because he's Christ. But they tried, right? But Christ had a great sense of humor, not just like a laugh it off type of humor, but like he understood what was serious and what was not. And one of the things that I always bring up and comes to mind for me is that someone walked up to him and said, "Hey, who should I give this money to?" And his response was, "Whose face is on it? Caesar's.
Right.
Then give it to Caesar." And people like are saying like, "Oh, give your money, give taxes to the government because that's fine." Like that, people see it as that way. I see it as he was saying, "Who cares?
Right.
Whose face is on it? Caesar. Give it to Caesar. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to God what is God." All right, like the money is Caesar's money. God doesn't care. Give it all away, right? It's give it away, get rid of it, give it to Caesar. Christ wasn't here to talk about fiscal policy. Christ was here to save souls. And so he didn't take any of that seriously. The times when he was serious was about the salvation of souls, right? Like, what do we do with this woman who, who has been caught in adultery, right? Let you who is without sin cast the first stone, which is to say, like, you can't do anything. You cannot judge her. I'm like disallowing you to judge her. I'm not saying that she's not guilty, but unless you are sinless, you don't get to judge her.
Or at least stone her to death. Dang.
Right. But like he was saying to them, right? Like this is a serious issue and you need to take it seriously. And you need to take yourself and your own sin seriously first. And so when everyone else was gone, he didn't condemn her and he told her to go and sin no more. And the sin no more is important because he understood what that sin was. He was going to die for that sin. He was going to suffer for the sins that she had committed. So to go and sin no more. And that's important. But he had a proper sense of humor and he knew that the stoning of her would not vindicate her. Right. It wouldn't save her. They're trying to condemn her and he is there to save the condemned. So like his humor made so he couldn't be scandalized. He knew what was serious and what was not. And to the scholars, the taxation, who has the right to put whom to death, like all of those things, they were serious to the Jewish scholars, but not to God. And so I say like a well-humored man cannot be scandalized. And I say man could be man or woman, but someone who has a proper sense of humor cannot be scandalized.
You know what's funny about that too, though, is I have found myself that, I mean, I've been doing this ministry for almost 5 years now, which is crazy to me, but in the last year, I have gotten the last year and a half, probably 2 years, I've gotten a better sense of humor. And now when, people try to drag me through the mud on Twitter or whatever it might be, I honestly can't help but laugh and not laugh as in like laugh it off like we were talking about, like, it's whatever, and then cry in my room. It's more of just like, I genuinely find it funny, but I will say other times, depending on what the topic is, I genuinely fear for their soul or like their conscience or where they are, because that I see past the persona that they put online of like the person who's admonishing me or or others too. It's not just myself. And sometimes I genuinely worry for the state of their soul. And people might think like, oh, that's a holier than thou take. But it's like, it's true. I do worry about that because of the fact that they're so they're so comfortable just
Mm-hmm.
doing these things. And then my husband and I usually just laugh about whatever they're saying because to us it's like, well, it doesn't really matter. They're complete
Right.
strangers on the internet. And most of the time what they say is so, I don't want to say so ridiculous, but just like really entertaining to me that I'm like, this is great. Like,
It betrays them, right? Because that's where we're going back to modesty. Modesty is like being immodest is that your outward perception is a reflection of your inwardness.
right.
If so, when you are portraying out there ugliness, anger, jealousy, it showcases your inwardness. And even though you're like, oh, they're a good person, but online they go crazy. It's like, no, because who you are is what you portray, right? No, like if you go online and you were a jerk to everyone online, and then you get off of your phone and you're the nicest guy in the world, right? Your
Doesn't really add
actual,
up.
but your actual person is the one that you portray the most, right? You could be nice to your family, mean to your neighbor, and it's like God knows God knows who you really are. And these are things that we really have to be careful about, right? We're talking about things like what modesty is, and we're like, I posted that in order or today that the way to like dating advice for men, the way like what you need to do is you need to be virtuous and kind and honest. It doesn't mean that every woman is going to love you. It doesn't mean that every woman is going to chase you or going to accept your advances. But what it does mean is that you're going to be okay, regardless of the outcome, right? That's like, because what you have, and like when I was younger in my heathenistic days, there was a guy who posted online, and I don't remember his name, but it was like some so's guide to getting dumped and taking it like a champ, right? And it's a really good guide. And basically it says like the basics of it are, if you are dumped or rejected, don't do anything rash.
Right.
Don't call her, don't text her, don't talk to her friends, don't do anything like that.
Don't join the priesthood.
You could, I mean, that's fine if you wanted to join the priesthood, but like
I
don't
mean,
do
yeah,
it.
but because you got broken
Right.
up with.
There's a couple of years between the breaking where things can, but what I'm saying is like, don't do the rash things. Don't try to seduce her friends or anything like that. Don't have a rebound. Just do your best to be your best self. And at some point, maybe she'll come back, maybe she won't, but you're being fine either way. And maybe somebody else will notice you. Maybe you'll find something else, and you'll have a whole new life and a whole new opportunity that you didn't know existed before. But you have to be moderated. You have to have that virtue of modesty in your actions, because the ugliness you show to the world, like if you were rejected and so you say that women are terrible, that's going to reflect, right, on you to everyone else that sees it.
Right.
You're not, no woman is going to be like, I want to marry the guy who is talking about how terrible women are. Some women are weird and they do like that kind of thing. I don't know. But like you've got those manosphere influencers, and they are alone and they are lonely and they are projecting, and you can feel it. And I've been married for 12 years now,
Oh,
and
congratulations.
thank you. And you can feel that. You can see it in what they write. You can remember as someone who like, you can remember what you were at that time, and seeing somebody stuck perpetually in it, and you really, like we're talking about, you feel bad for their souls. You feel, because like they're lost. They're not just lost in like the sense of like not just spiritually lost, but like in the world they are lost, and they're so misguided, and they're trying their best to guide other people to their misery. And the right people to tell you how to find happiness, those people are not the ones who are on there telling you how to find happiness, because their definition of happiness is wrong. Their view of how to get there is wrong, and it's based on these terrible societal expectations that they have seen, and trying to trick and like find the one trick that you can do to make women love you. It's like, they won't love you. It doesn't matter if they sleep with you. They don't love you, and you don't love them. And like, if you are tricking someone, you actually into doing something sinful, you are hating them.
Yeah.
And like, it's a big problem that we have, right? And so we need to get out of it. We need to, and like, I don't know if we're gonna have to have another podcast about 168, because we only got through modesty, but that's just the first one. And you could talk about this for hours, and no one's written a book on it, but you
Yeah.
could talk about this for hours about society and how society has gotten it wrong, and how we as Catholics, in our attempt to overcorrect, right, to correct the ship, we've overcorrected, and now we've gone the other side where we're still being immodest, but we're being immodest in a different way. Instead
Right.
of being immodest in the showing off our skin, we are being immodest in showing off our piety, which is just as immodest, because it's not the correct way to do it. Your goal in life is to get to heaven and to win souls to heaven as well, right? So you need to get to heaven, and then you try to get as many people in the boat to get you to heaven as you can.
Right.
That's your goal in life, okay? And it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how many women love you. It doesn't matter any of that. What matters is that you get to heaven, and that you bring as many people with you as you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think especially this is good for anyone who is online chronically, because that is the majority of where we see this nowadays. I think there's been a huge uptick in it because, previously before social media, there would be confrontations, of course, but they were more rare and they were usually solved privately. Or if
Mhm.
they did go public because of a fist fight or something, it's like it always got resolved somehow. But now things just circulate and perpetuate forever on social media. It never goes away.
There is a small subset of people who 20 years ago could have gotten into a fight that lasted years and got tens of thousands of people involved in it. Now there's a much larger subset of people who can do that, who
Yeah.
who like and people who are searching for those fights to get into, right? There are lots of broken people. Have you seen, I'm sure you have, the Ascension Presents, where Father Mike Schmitz just goes through the basic story of the Bible? Like, it's not the full Bible, but he talks about
Maybe a while
what
ago.
but the basics of it is that the Bible is about broken people, and God trying to fix them, trying to bring them back to make them less broken. So the Old
Mhm.
Testament is about the Israelites and their brokenness, and God's continued attempts to bring them, or to try to make them right. And he sends prophets, and he sends miracles, and he has them win decisive battles, and every single time they continue to be broken, because they're broken fundamentally, at the beginning. And
Yeah.
Christ, you know when Christ comes, he tries to fix people as well, and he gives them the opportunity. That's what confession is for, to fix our brokenness and to continue forward, and to try to not be as broken in the future. Like, your life is the story of Israel from the start. Like, and that's your whole life, because you break away, you come back, you break away, you come back. So it's like this narrative for all things, but it's also your narrative, because you're going to fall, and then you're going to come back, and God's going to send people to you to warn you about your sinful ways, and then you're going to come back, or you're not, and the consequences therein. But it's this, like, our lives are the Bible is the meta narrative for our lives, right?
Mhm.
And we have all of our brokenness that we have there, and and God's trying to talk to each and every one of us, to right us, and to get us to follow the right path. And it's difficult. It's not like God could make us all take the right path, but He wants us to want to take the right path.
Right.
And that's where it's difficult for us, because we're just terrible at it. We have
That's
our own
true.
brokenness, and we like to revel in that brokenness, right? Like, we create our own false deities, our own golden calves, and then we dance around the golden calf. And then God's like, that's not what you're supposed to do. I'm like, oh right, I'll stop doing that. And then like, oh, we made another one, and then we dance around that. It's like, nope, that's not what you're supposed to do.
Endless cycle.
Endless cycle, and that's like that's I guess that's the joke of it. That's the fun of it. Like, because you read through those and you read through the stories and you can see yourself in all of those characters that are there and all of the stories. Like, we're all Job. Everyone has sat there and like, I did nothing wrong. Why is bad stuff happening to me? And God's like, you don't understand it, but there's a reason. And you will understand that reason someday, but today you don't. And that has to be good enough.
Trust too, you know?
It is. It's about trust. My chair makes a really loud squeaking noise.
I thought that was your kid at first, or maybe a kid dying. I don't know.
No, it's my chair. But yeah, so that is the lives that we live. That is what we need to do. And this conversation about modesty, which we were supposed to talk about eupalia, and I don't know.
We're gonna do a part 2.
Okay.
We'll do a part 2 another time. We'll do another part 2.
Okay. Yeah. But like, yeah, I feel like this is really important, especially today, because we have lost our way so thoroughly, and because all the people who are supposed to guide us, right, all the people who purport that they're supposed to guide us towards truth and honesty and modesty and joy and hope have all been seduced. I shouldn't say all, because I can't. So many have been seduced by the power of the dollar, where their focus is on what they're going to do. And we're going to say one more thing, and I'm pretty sure we're about to wrap up here, but I want to say one more thing. And you probably haven't seen the movie Pi. It's an old movie.
I have.
You have Pi the movie? No, I think that's Life of Pi, which is different. Pi the movie is this black and white film about Jewish mysticism.
Oh, never mind. Yeah, I was thinking of the tiger and the boy in the boat.
Yeah, Tiger Boy. No, so Pi the movie, it's a weird movie. I don't recommend you see it necessarily, but there's a good point. I saw it years ago because I was obsessed with the number pi, which is a weird thing to be obsessed with. We don't need to go into that.
Another time.
So in this movie, it's about, the whole thing actually is about like Jewish mysticism and numerology.
Okay.
Which is weird. But the main character, whose name escapes me, goes and talks to his rabbi. And he found like this 316 digit number that's supposed to like be able to control the stock market or something. Like, it's just like it's a weird movie. But he finds this number, and the rabbi's advice to him is actually sound advice. He says, like, if you search for it, if you say this 312 digit number and you search for it, whatever, 312, like, you're going to find that everywhere. 312 steps from your bedroom to your front step, 312 birds in the sky, 312 cracks in the sidewalk on your way to work. You will see, if you look for it, you'll see it everywhere. And in our lives, like that's what we do. When you search, we're talking about scandal. When you search for scandal, you will find it everywhere. When you search for sin, you will find it everywhere. There are sins and people so evil that do things so horrifying that if you learned of it, it would scar you for life. There are things, it's like, we've been on the internet for a while. There are things that you cannot unsee that we have seen in the world. Like, and that's only scratching the surface, because that's only the evil that makes it so that somebody records it and puts it out there. There is evil so evil that you could scarce be able to comprehend how evil it could be. And if you search for it, you can find it. If you look for the worst of the worst, you will find it. However, the opposite is also true. If you search for joy, you will find it. If you search for humor, you will find it. If you search for joy, I think it said joy. Joy, yeah. If you search for faith, if you search for happiness, if you search for goodness, you will find it. No matter how dark the world is, no matter how terrible everything is.
I'm James McComb, reporting live from home in my bathrobe and slippers. Tonight, we're talking Dunkin' Polar Peppermint Coffee. Gene's here with the latest. Gene, do you copy?
The home with Dunkin' is where you want to be.
Right.
You will find that joy. And that's what we're called to do. We are not called to look for the worst of the worst in humanity. It is there. It is worse than you could possibly imagine. And learning about it does not help you. You are called to look for the best of the best in everyone, to find that spark, right? Christ would not step on a spark that would snuff it, or the smallest of sparks that would snuff it out, nor would he crush a reed, perchance that there could be one last note that could come from it. And he could create a symphony. Like, Christ understood that you look for the smallest of sparks and you fan it into a flame. Christ knew everyone's sins. Everyone's sins. He knows your sins. He knows my sins. He knew and knows everyone's sins. And he finds the good in each person. He knew exactly what the woman did when she was brought before him. He knew all of it. He knew it from, like, before she was brought to him. He knew that she'd be brought to him. And he knew the sins of every person there. Right?
Yeah.
And he found the goodness in her. And everyone else who dropped the stone and ran away, they missed out on what she got, because she got forgiveness, and they could have if they stayed. If they dropped their stones and asked for forgiveness, they would have gotten forgiveness. If Judas had gone to the foot of the cross, he'd be the greatest of saints, right? But when you despair, when you focus only on the darkness, you run away from the light, you can't find it. That woman looked for kindness, and she found that kindness in Christ. And she found hope there before her. When she was condemned, she looked for hope and she found hope. And so if you look for joy and hope and wonder, you will find it. And your listeners, let me look at the camera, you listeners here, if you look for joy, you will find it everywhere, in places you did not expect to see it. You will find it in the people who you think are terrible people. You will find sparks in there. And that's what my goal, and next time I come on, we'll talk more about my goal, fighting despair. But to start the fight against despair is to understand that every person you talk to has a spark in them. Even the ones that are wailing and gnashing their teeth at you, even the ones that hate you, there's a spark. And by showing them kindness and love and respect, you can turn that into something amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to end this on until we have
I
our
know.
part 2 back to talk about despair and everything else. Woo, despair.
I gotta do my plugs though. I gotta do my plugs because that's
Yes. Throw them out.
all right. So we have the St. Philip Neri Festival, which is our spark of joy in the otherwise dark world. So the St. Philip Neri Festival is it's on February 15th. We have Jeremy McClellan, who's a very funny comedian, very popular with Muslims for some reason. And I know it's weird, but he's a great guy. He's a Catholic, great guy. And we have Paul Rugg, who is another fantastic man that you should probably have on your show if you're trying to explore joy and hope and love. And we have a local comedy group that came out of our festival last year. They gathered together to do comedy, so they're going to be doing some improv, and it'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to do some stuff as well, so prepare for that. But if you are in the Phoenix area and you'd like to make it, you can go to catholicomedy.com/festival. If you are not in the Phoenix area and you cannot make it, but you still want to support the idea of it, we accept donations. If you go again to catholicomedy.com/festival, there is a There in Spirit option, which is basically a donation. It doesn't get you entry into there, but you can pay whatever you would like to pay to help us fund this festival. We're only trying to cover costs. Anything above the cost of the festival goes to charity. We're still working on what charity. Last year we gave it to a building fund. This year we think we're going to split it between, and that we didn't actually make a profit last year. We just gave money away from it, so we took a hit. We always take a hit. It costs us usually about $3,000 to $5,000 every year to put it on our personal money. That's after we get money. It would be nice to break even, but we're not in it for the money. We're in it for the joy. So if you do want to support us, that's a way to support us. And it's going to be a lot of fun if you can make it. And if we make enough money, then I'm going to see if you want to show up.
Yeah.
If we can afford to buy you a plane ticket out
really
there.
fun.
It would be fun.
I would love to. Yeah. It's just the fact that it's like, oh, travel's so expensive. I'm hoping the price goes down soon.
It is very expensive. We'll see what happens. But yeah. And the other thing is Chris Lawrence, who we were talking about before the call. He's a good guy, and he's trying to do. He's doing a podcast, and his whole thing about podcasting is trying to find the bits of joy in popular culture. So he brings on artists, and he brings on musicians and weird comedian people like me. Not really a comedian, but he brings people on to talk about why they do the things that they do. So he has a podcast called Goodnight, Everyone, which is supposed to be like a late night show, and so like I'm helping him out with it. But if you want to tune into that, if you follow me, I'll be posting about it when it comes up. Trying to get him to get into a thing so that we can do live streaming on multiple platforms, but
that'd be nice.
We'll work on it. But yeah, Chris Lawrence, he used to be on the Crusader Network, and then he's kind of just wants to focus on joy. So if you know him, follow him. Otherwise, give it a go. Try to find people.
Too, aren't you?
I am. I'm definitely on the Twitters. That's where you know me from. Catholic_comedy. And then my wife is Mrs. Cath Comedy. You can find her through me. She is fun.
She's great.
She is. Someday you should have a chat with her. I think it'll be a lot of fun. You can talk about traumatic family stuff. It'll be fun.
That's the best part, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's awesome. And hopefully, if people can make it out into the festival, that'd be really great, or at least support it. That'd be awesome. I'm linking all of it in the description below for people, so easily accessed. But yeah, besides that, Steve, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
All right. Yeah, not a problem. I enjoyed it. It's great to have another chat with you. Hopefully the audio on this one will be fine, and then we don't have to do a take 3.
This microphone better work, man.
But we're definitely going to have some, I think we'll definitely have to continue because we only got through Article 1 of Question 168. And to everyone out there, I suggest you go and read Question 168 because there's a lot in there that, again, I feel like theologians kind of gloss over because it's not the big stuff, but it's so big in your personal life to understand.
Right. And that's in the Summa, right?
Yeah, the Summa Theologica. So
you guys can go pick up your own copy of the Summa.
It's available online. If you look at Summa Theologica, there's a website that has it all online too, so you can get it you can look at it for free.
There you go. No excuses now. I expect everybody by part 2 to know everything about the Summa, at least 168.
Question 168.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it. And we'll have you back on for our part 2 sometime soon. And with all that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode and you learned something. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Bye.